Let me try to encourage you folks. I am real excited about the movement. Okay, there's a fringe. I get questioned a lot from the press because I'm being labeled the Tea Party candidate, which I don't really care if they call me that or not. I hope that I win so that I bring credit to the Tea Party movement. That's my biggest concern, frankly, of being labeled the Tea Party candidate. They can call me whatever candidate they want to call me. Okay, it's the ideas that we stand for that define us. But so I get this question a lot, and I get this kind of they're always fishing for what's the real story behind all this stuff. Well, the real story is on April 15th, 2009, when I had the opportunity to be the keynote speaker at the Dayton Tea Party's first big rally, where we held on the downtown square, and there's some 7,000 to 8,000 people jammed into the square. It wasn't Republican. It wasn't. Now, I think most of us come from conservative roots, and we want to return to a strict interpretation of the Constitution. I think most of us, at least that are in the party system, think that the Republican Party is closer to that. But I'll tell you, the complaints were about TARP. The complaints were about the bailouts. That started with Bush. The complaints were about Barack Obama. It was black, it was white, it was rich, it was poor. It was everything. And as I got to speak and look at this huge crowd that was spilling out into the streets, where I was later hearing that some of the folks that came couldn't even hear the speech, even though it was amplified, obviously, because they were so far down the street. It was wrapping around downtown buildings. It was an incredible event. And of course, you folks have seen this. You've repeated it. I think it's a movement that really is about the people, about adhering to the strict interpretation of the Constitution, limited government, the limited powers, trying, as I would call it, to tip the triangle back on its base. And for those that don't know what I'm talking about, our founders envisioned a fabulous system of checks and balances. We always talk about it in the view of the legislative, judicial, and executive branches, but they also envisioned it through local, state, and federal government. And we have gone from feeding up the triangle to turning the triangle on its head and throwing all of our money to Washington so they can trickle it back down to the states, so the state can trickle it back down to us, and meanwhile we're giving up all of our power and control. And I know you folks, whether you use that analogy or not, are about changing that, as you should be. And the final balance of power, of course, which is maybe where we're more focused than not, is really the contract between the American people and its government called the Constitution that is being violated on a regular basis. But where the power is that you folks are having, that you're really making a huge difference, is through just standing up for the truth. You've become a voice. And I promise you I don't do this normally because it's a little tacky, but I don't get to read a whole lot because frankly I'm not a very avid reader, never was. I'll admit this even though I'm on camera. I don't think I really read one book through all of college completely cover to cover. I think I read one, and it was a book called Built to Last, and it was an easy read. A guy named Jim Collins wrote it. Great business book for any of you that are in business. But the rest of them I'd read enough to make sure that I understood the material and I'd move on. But I've been very slow reading because outside of my Bible reading, I have a hard time keeping up with anything. I've been very slow reading this book called Reagan's War. And just this week, I had a few moments of downtime, and I was reading it, and it hit me. And this is the only place I've done this, but it hit me that you folks really are doing this. Now, I've used other analogies in the past to get there, and I'll talk about my favorite at the end. But this book is about Reagan's fight with communism and how he handled that through the Cold War. And again, whether you're a Reagan fan or not, although I presume all of us are, something happens over time. The beauty of what he did was he challenged them in the free marketplace of ideas. And he said, basically bring it on. Because if you're standing up for the truth, you have nothing really to be afraid of. And that's what I try to represent. Now, there's a debate over what the truth is. But wouldn't it be beautiful if, I said this to the Dayton Daily News editorial board this week. I love the crazy liberal people. I shouldn't say this on camera. It's going to be clipped against me here. I don't love them. I disagree with their policies for the camera. But I love the crazy liberal left people in the House. You know why? Not because they're right. I can't stand their policies. But because they're willing to stand up for what they say they really believe. They're not in the mushy middle. You can have an honest debate then over the fallacies of their policy proposals. Unfortunately, what we have in the political system is everybody's constantly rushing under the guise of pragmatism to the mushy middle. well, we can't get there, so we'll just get here. Now, I recognize in politics, often you can only get here, but we should never lose sight of there. That's the goal, and that's the debate we ought to be having. You can work forward from there. But anyway, this book is all about his war and how he proceeded, and it just hit me. This chapter was on the radio broadcasts that the Americans were pushing into the Eastern Bloc and allowing the Eastern Bloc to listen to. And they were encouraging the citizens on the ground there to dissent. And Colonel Heinrich, and I'm going to get it wrong, Pikuk, a senior official in the Polish Interior Ministry, saw the transformation before his eyes, and this is a quote. It says, under its influence, and it was talking about the radio programs, under its influence, people simply stopped being afraid. And this is always the beginning of the end of all sorts of tyrannies. There wasn't a single coordinated meeting of the special services of the Soviet bloc which did not include consideration of matters relating to the radios. Now, let me tell you, folks, what's happening behind the closed doors. I don't think there's a single meeting of the Republican Party that does not include consideration of the Tea Party movement. I have a feeling there's not many single meetings of the Democrat Party that doesn't include consideration of the Tea Party movement. Folks, these folks are standing up for the truth. You're doing the right thing. We can debate the truth. That's important. We have to have the right message. But you're having an impact, and you're having an impact through your voice. You're having an impact through your activism. There is no politician out there who doesn't get worried about 8,000 people who join on a square under a single banner and a single cause. Okay, we have the power. That's the beauty of America to do it. But we have to stop being afraid. We have to arm ourselves with the truth and go out there and advocate for it. And I believe you folks are doing that. I sit in the leadership meetings. I'm part of the policy, being the policy chair. I get to sit in the leadership meetings of the House Republican Caucus. I can tell you we have a very different caucus than we used to have. They're moving to the right, not the left, okay? Our leadership isn't scared of the ideas of the Tea Party movement, but they are worried about the political consequences of it, okay? And by that, they mean working with it, okay? The beauty of it is, what I love about it is, I'm telling you, it's brought up constantly. It's a constant consideration. You know, one of the early lessons I learned as a council member was that those who are not principled in victory are not principled in defeat. And let me explain what I mean by that, and then I'd be happy to take some questions. We're tired of electing people who say one thing and then govern a different way. And we've heard that a lot. It's a very common phrase on the stump, you know, for most politicians. But what that really represents is that they're not principled in victory. Okay, they say one thing and do another. They don't understand that these things they say have consequences. Well, those very same people are also not principled in defeat. And what I mean by that is, when faced with the decision to lose their power or go a way that they believe is going to keep them in power, whether it violates their quote-unquote principles or not, they're probably going to go the way that keeps them in power. Now, all of us would like to elect people who are willing to stand on their 2 feet, say, this is what I believe, this is what I'm going to do, and that's it. But the reality is, whether we're effective of rooting out so many of our politicians or not, there will still at least be some who slip through the cracks who really don't do that. And the reality is, I would say it's probably like 90%, 85% of the people up there, in Columbus at least, don't do that. They're about non-principled maintenance of power. So what that means for you folks is that you just have to find the pressure point. And the pressure point is victory. The pressure point is loud voices. The pressure point is throwing something out. The pressure point is these mass meetings you folks are having, which are getting attention and being brought up in the leadership meetings, okay? You're doing the right thing. As discouraged as you might be, as discouraging as you might get, the fact that you're even able to pull 20, 30 people together on a Saturday morning for a meeting like this, for which I caused the problem because of my calendar, and I appreciate you doing it, means a lot. I mean, I can remember back in the days in the early 2000s when I would try to pull together as one of the Republican leaders in Huber Heights a small meeting of Republicans, and we might get 10 people. People are now alive, they're awake, they care, and I really appreciate that. Let me make one final plea, and that is, this is a race that really matters. The Auditor of State is the final watchdog, eyes and ears for the Ohio public financially. It shouldn't matter to you whether Kasich or Strickland's governor. You ought to want somebody that knows the difference between a balance sheet and income statement. You ought to want somebody that is not allegiant to a political party or a particular politician, which I would argue both of the other statewide or large party candidates are. You should want someone who's willing to stand up.